What's up, my peeps? It's the turtle smashing, dragon punching, titan smashing, zombie blasting, race car drifting, multiplayer butt whipping, the collector of coins, rings, looms, rupees, and tanukis. I got food for self, emeralds for wealth, and med packs for health. I got the double jumps, turbo boosts, time freezes, and invincibility. Leveled up all of my abilities. I run Vice City and made the Mushroom Kingdom better. And I am the first human Spectre. This is Mastermind, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about what's going on, peeps. Thank you for tuning in to another video. Today's video I would like to discuss something near and dear to my heart, that is Sega, the video game company developer, Sega. Before I get into all of that, I just want to make it clear that this is not just for the old school folks like myself. This is also for the younger video game generation, people who've just been in video games for about 10 years or so. Because a lot of people don't know what Sega has meant to the video game industry and how what I'm about to discuss is such of a big deal. Recent news is that Sega is downsizing. Now, they're moving their office in California somewhere from, I think it was Southern California, or no, San Francisco to Southern California, from what I understand. And they're also laying off, or as they put it, voluntarily retiring about 300 employees in Japan. Usually when companies make moves like that, it's usually an indication that they're expanding or they're downsizing. In this case, they're clearly downsizing. They've lost a lot of money. Now, what I want to illustrate first is what Sega has meant to the video game industry, and some things that I find kind of disturbing, and a disturbing trend with a lot of the great companies in our video game industry, like Nintendo, like Capcom, like Sega, like Konami. A lot of these great companies and some of the things that are happening. But specifically, we're going to talk about Sega and what's going on right now. So a couple of months back, I did a video on gaming ideas for the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. I will leave the link on the description below so you can check that out. But I didn't realize when I was making that video back then that I should have probably just done a video on the company as a whole, not just what's happening with Sonic. Because as a company, at one point, Sega was competing with Nintendo as far as the kind of games that they were actually releasing. And all the franchises that they had and all the incredible IPs that Sega still currently owns. I don't understand why a lot of these franchises have just been ignored. So I'm going to go over a few of them just so I can illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the first one is going to be Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, I already did a whole video on Sonic the Hedgehog, but I just want to say they take their #1 franchise and they put it on the least selling, most popular system out right now. I have a problem with this. I don't mind that they have it on the Wii U and working with Nintendo, but really, it's hurting them as far as money is concerned, because there are a lot of people who have PlayStations and an Xbox and PC who would love to see a AAA Sonic game on there. I don't care if it's 2D or 3D. I prefer a 2D game that really goes back to its roots in HD, and they really put a lot of love and effort into it because it's their main franchise. Do something similar to what Nintendo has done with the Mario franchise. But unfortunately, they didn't do that, and it's their #1 franchise, and I do believe that it is hurting them. Now, I'm not saying every franchise and every IP that they've ever created needs to be remade or have a sequel, but come on. You're telling me that games like Sega GT or Samba de Amigo wouldn't be successful? How about Super Monaco? That was a great Genesis game that everyone loved. They did so many racing games. Who doesn't remember Outrun? I used to play Outrun all the time in the arcade. And although I think zombies have been stale for quite a few years, they're still really popular. With Dying Light, the remake of Resident Evil, you're telling me Sega couldn't do anything with this franchise? For years, a lot of fans have been asking for specific games from Sega, specific games from Konami, specific games from all the older classic companies, and a lot of them we haven't seen. And then some of them they've kind of brought back, like in a Genesis collection or something lame like that. I'm talking about, give us a remake of a game, a really good remake. Put a lot of love and care into it. Or if it still holds up well, do an HD remix of it. Give it to us in 1080p graphics with maybe a couple of extra levels, do something with so many of their franchises that they're just continuing to ignore. And then other ones, turn them into AAA titles and really just do a whole reimagining of certain games. I'm confident that they could do it and that a lot of people would purchase these things, but unfortunately, it just hasn't happened. Could you imagine using the Wiimote to play Sega Bass Fishing, like a new version of it, with HD graphics and just a next-gen version of Sega Bass Fishing using a Wiimote? Now, I wasn't a huge Sega Bass Fishing fan, but I know it was kind of popular. Put it on the Wii U. The point is, don't take your #1 franchise like Sonic and turn that into a gimmick over and over. You have other franchises you can experiment with. I mean, go ahead and take Space Channel 5 and put that on the Xbox One using the Kinect. I mean, if you really want to do something different, those are the franchises you mess with. So not too long ago, they re-released Daytona USA on the PS3 and the 360, and of course, the graphics were real nice. They bumped up the resolution and they fixed a lot of the drawing and everything, and it was just pretty much the exact same game, just with much cleaner graphics. I think for a franchise like this, why couldn't they do almost the opposite, and instead of porting it over, make a whole new racing game and maybe add those old stages in there? So maybe make a racing game that kind of competes with like Need for Speed or something like that. Obviously, you don't want to make it a simulator like kind of like what you see with Gran Turismo or Forza, but you can make it more like Forza Horizon or Drive Club. Just like Virtual Racing or Sega Rally, Daytona USA could easily have a new game in the franchise, and they can always bring back some of the old stages for nostalgia and things like that. But you got to do more than what they were doing. With all of these indie companies bringing out these retro-style games, this would be a great opportunity for Sega to turn around and reintroduce this franchise, Vector Man, which came out towards the end of the Genesis life cycle, so it never really hit its potential as far as being marketed to a broad audience. I think this would be a great opportunity to release this franchise in a Metroidvania kind of subgenre. Unfortunately, it's just me here talking about it. You want to do an HD remix of something? Do one for Space Harrier. Add a bunch of new stages, add a storyline, make it, of course, 1080p at 60 frames per second. Imagine that game at 60 frames per second with modern graphics nowadays. Even give us a first-person mode or make it first-person. Do something awesome with it. Make it a multiplayer so that way you have a mode where you're in that world and you're shooting opponents. Make it crazy. It's not something that would cost that much money, and Sega could have done that in the last few years. But again, these are franchises and different ideas and different things that it's coming from a gamer. I'm a gamer. I don't know if they've allowed corporate execs and just non-gamers to make these decisions for them, but I think something like that would be successful, especially if it got good reviews and a lot of people bought into it. What about a Phantasy Star MMO on the PC and Xbox One and PlayStation 4? How about that? I remember quite a few years ago when the Saturn came out, people wanted a Sonic game, and instead Sonic Team came out with Knights, and to our surprise, it turned out to be a great game. Why not do a AAA title, a AAA version of Knights right now? Stop with the porting it over, and it hasn't held up well in its old incarnation to today's standards. So make a new one. And I don't mean a new one like the one that they butchered a few years ago. I mean really put some love and care into it and make a great game. It's not going to sell, not because the character isn't marketable, but if your game sucks, it just sucks. I wanna fly high. That's what I want to do in Knights. I want to fly high. I want a 3D game, an open world game with some awesome shit going on. Sega, you want to concentrate on digital media and mobile phones and shit like that? Put Seaman on there. I have no problem with it. While you're at it, there are plenty of other franchises you can go ahead and put on mobile devices that would be great. A lot of them. And you could also do like Choo Choo Rocket. That was one of my favorite games, but put that on console too. My 2014 Game of the Year was definitely Sunset Overdrive. And that game was heavily inspired by Jet Set Radio. After all these last couple of years on the 360, PS3, and now these new gen systems, Why haven't we received a modern version of Jet Set Radio? It would be awesome. And where the hell is Shenmue? This was supposed to be a trilogy. They never finished the third one. It was never released, and that is a travesty. And I gotta tell you, a lot of fans still haven't forgiven Sega, but would more than forgive Sega if they would have released this. I would say go ahead and remake part 1 and 2 and then actually have the third one as a AAA title. It's something that we'll probably never see, but those of us who experienced Shenmue 1 in particular for the first time, that was unlike anything we had ever played. And to this day, I still regard Shenmue as one of the greatest video game experiences of my life. And that's saying a lot because I've played quite a bit of games. Do you have any idea how many RPGs Sega has been responsible for over the years? It is staggering, all the games in general. I'm not even putting all of them on this video, but just to name a few, just to show a few, it's not just Phantasy Star. There's quite a bit that Sega's been responsible for. Really, there's just too many games, too many fantastic franchises that they can capitalize on, and they haven't. And really, there's no excuse for it. I mean, Shinobi. Who wouldn't want to see a modern-day Shinobi like Ninja Gaiden did? Or, speaking of Shinobi, Shadow Dancer. Shinobi with a fucking dog by your side. Alter Beast would be totally amazing now. So would Golden Axe. It's still one of the greatest hack and slash games ever made. How about an HD remix of Streets of Rage 1 and 2? That would be crazy, and I don't mean just clean up graphics. I mean really redo the graphics but give us the same game. Gunstar Heroes is another game made by Treasure that Sega could have capitalized on years ago. Imagine now an HD version running at 60 frames per second with multiplayer online. That would be insane. If you want mascots, great characters, it's not just Sonic and Knights and Tails and all of that. You have Alex Kidd, you have Bug, which was a decent game. You have Clockwork Knight, that would be amazing, an HD remix of that. You had a style. All you gotta do is just give this to me in HD with the same music and the same art style, and I will be in love all over again. It was one of my favorite games at that time. Still holds up well. And of course, Echo the Dolphin. Now here is a game that I'm not too sure I would want them to remake. I would want like a Skyrim or like just an open world RPG in the ocean with the dolphins. Just something so epic and so different with that character. That would be insane if Sega would pull off something like that. If they even had done it a couple of years ago, I'm sure it would have gotten a lot of attention if they would have done it right. One of my favorite video game franchises of all time, especially because of the soundtrack on the first 3 games, is Panzer Dragoon. I love this franchise. This spiritual successor, Crimson Dragon, wasn't that great, but I would love for them to do another RPG, not another shooter, but another Panzer Dragoon RPG. That would be epic. Just like how I said they would do it for Echo the Dolphin, they should do it for Panzer Dragoon, of course, with the same fighting system, or at least similar fighting system to the original Panzer Dragoon saga. That game was a limited release and is extremely rare to find right now, but it's definitely a classic nonetheless. Bayonetta 2 exclusivity on the Wii U was a huge mistake. It didn't really help Nintendo because their demographics are much more geared towards the Mario style of games, but it really hurt Sega as a whole, as a company, because a lot of the people who bought the original version were PS3 and 360 owners, and now on the next generation, on the new generation systems, they don't have a Bayonetta sequel to play. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the business decisions that Sega has made over the years. And I would say, to take it a step further, that that is actually a microcosm of what the video game industry is going through right now. You have companies that are making exclusive games for certain consoles, and it's really hurting the industry, it's really hurting the fan base, but in this particular instance, it's actually hurting the companies because it really didn't help Nintendo, and it really doesn't help Sega because Nintendo has published it, and Platinum Games have created it, and it's not going to get in the hands of most gamers, and it really does belong to Sega. Now, if you've been following my channel, you know that I cover all video games and even some movies and other things. I'm not just exclusive to video games, but if there was one thing I'm probably more known for is my coverage of fighting games. It is my favorite genre, and I don't understand why Sega hasn't really gotten into this market again. Fighting Vipers would be a great one, so would Fighters Mega Mix or Last Bronx or anything like that. But I'm really surprised that Virtua Fighter 6 hasn't come out yet. Now, I know probably the main issue is money. That's always the issue, but you're talking years and years and years where they probably could have released something other than just incremental upgrades to Virtua Fighter 5. That's not what people really want unless you're a diehard Virtua Fighter fan. And I also understand, because I do rather enjoy Virtua Fighter, that it's not the most user-friendly game. It's on the difficult side, easy to pick up but difficult to master, and that kind of gets boring after a while if you're not into fighting games. I can clearly understand a novice not really getting into that game, but still, with the new generation and with the re-emergence of fighting games because of Street Fighter 4, I really do believe that they should have done a sequel to Virtua Fighter 5 by now. For those of you who have never heard of Eternal Champions, let me tell you about this game. At the time of this game's release, the games that were dominating were Street Fighter, of course, and Mortal Kombat. We also had, around this time, different fighting games coming out, a whole bunch of different ones, all the SNK ones, even a game called Clay Fighters. I mean, there was quite a bit of fighting games right around this time, but one of the ones that stood out to me was Eternal Champions, and the reason for that is because it kind of blended a lot of the things from Street Fighter and from Mortal Kombat that I really liked. It had fatalities, or like enders, stage fatalities. It had the 3 buttons, punches, and the 3 kicks, and it played a little closer to Street Fighter, but it had the cool characters, and the whole idea, the whole theme was fighters from different times, different realms. And I thought that that was so amazing. Imagine with the production values now and the different things that video game companies are able to do if we had an Eternal Champions. This would have been a great thing for Sega. They've never, I think ever since the Sega CD version, never released an Eternal Champions, which is such of a travesty. And it's the last game on this list that I am talking about. It's the last franchise because it's one of those games and one of those franchises that even if I went and I showed you gameplay, if you've never seen it before, it's not going to really impress you. It's not going to have the effect that it had on me when I was growing up. It's like if I showed you the original Mortal Kombat. It's not really going to blow you away compared to what MKX is doing. Well, it's the same thing here, but now there's nothing new or nothing modern for me to show you. Unfortunately, it's just the old games that we played. So giving my final thoughts, I really do hope that Sega is able to turn it around. I don't think they're going to. So the only alternative would be for a larger company to buy them out. And I know that probably defeats the purpose of the point that I made earlier about exclusivity, but that would be a better option than to just see them go under. Who would I like to see pick them up? Well, as far as Sony is concerned, I think they have a good amount of franchises, so I don't think Sony needs them as much. And Nintendo definitely doesn't need them with all the characters and franchises and IPs that Nintendo has. So I think Microsoft will probably benefit a little bit better, but then again, they've picked up Rare and they haven't exactly done anything great with any of those IPs, for the exception of Killer Instinct. So it really isn't the best situation right now in the video game industry for Sega, but I really do wish for the best, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, leave a comment. I'm definitely interested in knowing what you think, and don't forget to share the video and subscribe, of course. Thanks for watching. Mastermind out.
Blasting y'all, overcasting y'all.